Hey guys, this is Brian Shaw. I'm coming to you live here from SHAWSTRENGTH in Colorado. We're 8 weeks out from the Arnold, so this is our third update video. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my diet challenges this week, about the deadlift challenges this week, and about how I'm trying to organize my events for the Arnold. So obviously the diet is a huge part of my performance and competing at the Arnold, and it's definitely a grind to get through it. And we're gonna try to cover a little bit more of my meal plan and things like that. But for some reason, this week I just kind of hit a little bit of a wall with my food intake, and it has been where it's been very easy to eat all my meals. And for some reason this week, it was just, I was not getting through my meals as quick as I have been. So I spoke to Nathan Payton, who does my diet planning for me, and we've made some adjustments that I will start this week. So hopefully my body will respond a little bit better, and I'll digest my food a little bit better this week. And we'll see how I adjust to that and how it relates to my training. So it's always very interesting, or it's actually fascinating to me when you make food changes, how it affects your performance and how it affects your recovery and all of that. So it's something that we're constantly trying to fine tune, and we'll probably make several more changes in the next 8 weeks before the Arnold. So I'm really hoping that works good, and that I can kind of get past this plateau, if you will, with the eating, and that it's a little bit easier to get through that in the coming weeks. The next challenge that I had this week was the deadlift, and I'm really trying to plan out how I'm going to train the deadlift, being that it's going to be on a normal deadlift bar, but that the ends of the bar are going to be longer, so that when it's loaded, it's going to flex more off of the floor. And since that's going to be a specially made bar, one of a kind, there's no way for me to duplicate that in training without having the bar and the plates that we're going to use. So I'm just trying to figure out my positioning, how I'm going to pull the bar, if I'm going to pull it fast, if I'm going to pull it slow, and basically how to optimize, if you will, my pulling technique for that specific deadlift. And we tried a few different things in training, and have tried a few different things, and we'll have to see how that plays out in the coming weeks. I think the biggest thing that I've had to make an adjustment with is the fact that it's going to be a full range of motion deadlift and not the Hummer tire setup, where that's more of a partial deadlift. And I've been basically set up a training plan because I figured we'd be doing the Hummer tire setup. So I've been going now for a few months of training elevated height like I normally would for the Hummer tire pull. So I've had to completely revamp that training, and I feel like it's coming together pretty well, but I think it's going to take me a couple more weeks to where I'm starting to adjust better to pulling from the floor again. So it's kind of like riding a bike, for me. And if I do it for a few weeks, it comes back together, and I'm starting to feel more comfortable with the deadlift. And I think this week is going to be more of an effort pull for me. So I'm really hoping that that feels good, and that we can put up some bigger weights, and then I'll probably feel a lot better. And I tend to feel a lot better after I lift heavier in a training cycle. So hopefully that goes well. And I'll probably be able to update you about that next week. The next challenge that I really have tried to work through this week is how to place all the events in my training week so that I'm covering all my bases when it comes to those, and I'm not overdoing it, but I'm still trying to train everything the best that I possibly can. So with the events being so heavy, for example, yoke being, over 1,500 pounds and the frame being 1,100 pounds, the deadlift, it's probably going to be somewhere around 1,000 pounds or maybe even more, depending on the bar setup. All of these things, plus the log being so heavy, the dumbbell being so heavy, they all take their own toll. So I'm really trying to play with that, and that's going to be an ongoing work in progress, if you will, because I don't know how my body will respond to all these different events, and the recovery that'll take place after the events is going to be very challenging as well. So the next big challenge that I've really had to work through this week is how I'm going to actually lay out my training plan so that I cover all of these different events, and I'm able to practice and train all of the events without overtraining. So with all the events being so heavy, with the yoke being over 1,500 pounds, the frame carry being 1,100 pounds, the deadlift being for max, the log being 440 to 450 pounds, and the dumbbell being 274 pounds, all of these things take a toll on your body when you're training them, and you can't go all out 100% on every single event every week, or otherwise you just run yourself into the ground. You'd overtrain and probably open yourself up for an injury. So what I'm trying to do is balance all of these different events in my training week, so that certain events I work harder on one week, and the next week I'll back off on those events and I'll work harder on the other events. So, for example, this week I went a little bit heavier on the frame carry in training, which felt good, and I backed off on the yoke this week. I left that a little bit lighter, and that seemed to work well. I think those events are going to end up playing off of each other, so I'll go heavy on one, lighter on the other, and I think that's kind of how I'm going to do it, and I'll see how they're progressing, and that's going to have to be a week-to-week decision for me, just based on the fact that they're both so heavy, and the frame carry might end up being easier than the yoke. I'm not sure at this point yet, but it's just one of those things where I want to try to not overtrain those events, but I want to be able to make sure that I'm getting them all in heavy enough so that I'm prepared when we get to the contest, because keeping in mind, obviously, that the time that I want to be at 100% will be at the actual competition and not necessarily in training. So we'll see. I know there was some other questions that people had pertaining to this a little bit, especially after the last week's video where I announced that the yoke was going to be 700 kilos, which is an unheard of weight for a yoke, or, for a man to carry that much weight is really unheard of. So, it's one of those things where a few of you asked if I would go up to that heavy of a weight in training, or how I would kind of cycle that training. And to be fair, honestly, I don't know if I will actually go that heavy in training. I may get there once or twice. I'm not quite sure yet. It really depends on how my body responds to each week. And if I put a little bit heavier load and it responds well, then I may go a little bit heavier. And if I feel like I'm beat up after that, I may back off for a couple weeks before I go really heavy on that again. And it's all a balancing act. And I try to plan the training out the best that I possibly can, but I don't know how I'm going to feel from week to week. So I have to make adjustments on the fly, and I just have to make decisions with the training. If for example, on Friday, I'm feeling beat up, I probably am not going to go that heavy on Saturday. And it's just one of those things I have to play off of each training day and see how I'm recovering and how my body's feeling. So I don't know if I'm going to get that heavy with all of these events. I typically do in training get up to 100%, but I'm not quite sure. I haven't made those decisions yet based on the fact that the Arnold just keeps getting heavier and heavier. 3 or 4 years ago, I actually used to train above 100%. And it was just something I would normally do because the weights weren't as heavy for me at that point. So I would be able to go above 100%. And when I got to the contest, it was lighter. But obviously, when you're talking the extreme weights that we have to do now, it's not something where in training, I don't think that I'll end up going above 100%. I may get to 100%, and that might be about it. So we'll just have to play with that as the weeks go by here and just see how it all plays out. It's always very fun to see how my body responds to the food, to the training, to the recovery, everything that I'm doing, and trying to piece that puzzle together. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Another one of the questions that I received under the video last week was, do I think I can beat Eddie Hall at the deadlift at the Arnold? And this is a great question, actually. I think the deadlift event at the Arnold this year is going to be very, very interesting because it's a completely new setup. The bar is going to flex differently, and the plate setup's going to be different than any of the competitors has used. And all of us are kind of in the same boat because we're going to be experiencing that bar and this deadlift for the first time there at that contest. Ed is obviously capable of pulling a massive weight. He's proved that a few different times last year. And from everything I've seen, his deadlift training has been going really well. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see where that goes, because obviously myself and Ed are not the only very good deadlifters in the competition. I think Zadrunas, it's always kind of been questioned what he could actually pull if we had a max deadlift setup with a flexible bar. So that'll be very interesting. I think Hofthor's been getting better at deadlift. Jerry Pritchett's coming. I mean, there's any number of guys that could play a role and kind of be a spoiler in that event too. I think the really interesting part of the deadlift at the Arnold, and it's always been this way, is that there's no suits allowed. So it's a completely raw deadlift, standard setup. And a lot of the guys, for example, really use a deadlift suit a lot. And I think at the Arnold, that's one thing I've always really liked, is that the suits are not allowed in the Arnold at all. And they've never been worn there. So, it's one thing, to be honest, it's a rule that I wish that all of strongman competitions took away the suits, that those weren't allowed at all to be worn. And that everything was done raw, whether it's a squat, deadlift, whatever. So I think that from that perspective, it's just a pure strength event. So it's going to be very interesting. I think that I've got a chance to beat Ed at it, if I'm honest, but I think that he's going to be very good. And he's going into the competition. I think everybody would have to probably say, myself included, that Ed's the man to beat at that event. So it'll be interesting. And, we're definitely going to have a good battle, I'm sure. All right, guys, I think that's all we have time for this week. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to check this video out. I really appreciate you hitting the like button and leaving your comments below. It's fun to be able to answer those questions and to be able to interact with you guys a little bit differently here. So keep training hard, and we'll come with another update next week.